Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And the other day I was sitting around with my friends and we were talking about James Bond. And we were debating what the best James Bond movie ever might be. And I thought about GoldenEye at first because this is the first one I ever saw. And I was like, nah. Even though I love the video game and it has some nostalgic cred, it's not a great film when you really sit and picture it. And then my mind went to the Daniel Craig, his first film, the reboot, Casino Royale. And I thought, yeah, that's my winner. That's a beautiful film. It's getting to be a pretty old film at this point, which is wild. But yeah, it's beautifully shot, well acted, new style of James Bond with extra grit and guts, but still with that suave, debonair, handle his business at the fancy party kind of thing. And I like the structure of Casino Royale because so much of that movie happens at the casino, and it's all this fancy suit party with all of these eccentric, rich people from all around the world, and poker's a metaphor for the game they're playing with each other socially in public at this fancy party, but it's also a metaphor for what's going on in the back halls and the seedy underbelly of this meeting where stuff is also really shaking out hardcore. And I suppose I just think that's a really enjoyable, interesting dynamic that's kind of a metaphor for the way we interact with people as our public selves and also some of the things that move and shake in our souls and in our relationships behind the scenes, and how the dance between the two results in decisions and big life choices. And likewise, I think that's the kind of party that we're seeing depicted here at the beginning of the book of Esther. This elaborate, beautiful event that King Xerxes puts on to entertain everybody, all the who's in his whole empire. They're all there for 180 days. And it's kind of fun to imagine that this is a party that's just nice. But come on, like Casino Royale or like any party, there's a whole bunch of subtext going on here, all kinds of things happening behind the scenes. And one of the reasons I know that is because of the way the book of Esther plays out here in its first chapter. We read 8 verses yesterday where we get a description of all the wealth and the opulence and the generosity of the king. But then when we get on to the rest of chapter 1, we're going to see that apparently nerves were really frayed here because there's one more little bonus party, a 7-day drinking party to wrap up the 180-day party that had already happened. And things get spicy there. And in fact, I think the king's nerves are so frayed by what's going on behind the scenes that it results in his marriage not surviving this party, as we're going to see as we work ahead into chapter 1 in the coming days. What is it that's going on under the surface? Well, it's intrigue regarding whether or not Persia is going to load up all of its soldiers and march west to go and attack the Greeks. And look, to you and me, that just might seem like, why all the drama? I mean, it's a long time ago. You have wars constantly. I mean, you're always fighting people. I mean, I heard that the Persians were always putting down rebellions all the time. How many battles and wars do you have every single year? Why is this one such a big deal? Why is it so dramatic? Well, 2 reasons. One, because of who's telling us the story. We're getting this from the perspective of an outsider in the Bible, the Jews, and Jewish authorship. But then we're also getting it from the perspective of an outsider in the extra biblical account of this party from Herodotus, a Greek. So both of those are going to have a little bit of a raise an eyebrow at the Persians' perspective. But the second reason that this is bigger than all the other fights and all the other things and required more planning is because of its historical consequences, in that the outcome of this possible fight between East and West could determine how the ancient world and indeed the rest of the world plays out. But also, this is a bigger campaign. It's a much harder campaign than putting down a little rebellion here or there. Those are regional things. This is civilization versus civilization we're talking about. It's a big commitment. You're putting your reputation on the line, and maybe getting a little or copious amounts of alcohol in the system, maybe that could help people make decisions better back then. We do have some extra biblical sources that suggest that this is kind of how the Persians made choices that were of this size. You get together and you drink for a real long time. Whether or not that's true in all cases, I don't know. It looks like it is the case here. This is fun, though, because in the same way that Casino Royale gives us both the normal person view of the event from the perspective of the party goer, but it also gives us the behind the scenes version of events from the perspective of the international mover and shaker. So we get the very public view of the party in Esther chapter 1, but we get more of the behind the scenes international mover and shaker view of this party from the histories by Herodotus. I'm going to read you a few excerpts and summarize what he tells us about it here. It says, Xerxes then, after the conquest of Egypt, being about to take in hand the expedition against Athens, summoned a chosen assembly of the best men among the Persians that he might both learn their opinions and himself, in the presence of all, declare that which he intended to do. And so then Herodotus goes on to tell us a bunch of things that Xerxes says about himself and how awesome he is, and that he's going to put a bridge over the Hellespont so he can march his army over there and conquer those dirty Greeks. And then one of his generals, a loyal general named Mardonius, speaks up and is like, yeah, that right there, that's a good idea. Now, look, I don't think this conversation is happening at the event where everybody's present and just milling around. I think the actual decision makers are the ones who are gathered about here. There's probably a lot of them. It's probably a very big meeting, but don't picture the gigantic meeting with all of the people of the city gathered around. This is more of the stuff for the elites going on here. So Mardonius expresses his support for Xerxes' ideas, and things are quiet for a minute, and then we get this. And when the other Persians were silent and did not venture to declare an opinion contrary to that which had been proposed by Xerxes and Mardonius, then Artabanos, the son of Hystaspes, so this is going to be Darius's brother, Xerxes' uncle, being father's brother to Xerxes and having reliance upon that, spoke as follows. O king, if opinions opposed to one another not be spoken, it is not possible to select the better in making the choice, but one must accept that which has been spoken first. If, however, opposite opinions be uttered, this is possible, just as we do not distinguish the gold with which is free from alloy when it is alone by itself, but when we rub it on the touchstone in comparison, we can tell the difference. A little bit of paraphrase there is mine. So then Artabanos gets up and is like, maybe this isn't such a good idea. I counseled your dad not to go and fight against the Scythians, modern-day Ukrainians, and he didn't listen to me, and that did not go well. The Scythians famously wouldn't meet the Persian kings in battle. They were nomadic and quick, and they could just pack up their stuff, and they're like, you can't burn us out because we can live off of anything. If your standard of living is like the one we've accepted for ourselves, we really don't have anything to lose. It's fascinating back and forth between these two people groups. But Artabanos is like, hey, the Scythians got us, but the Spartans and the Athenians are made of much sterner stuff than the Scythians even. And he goes on to remind the war council that Datis and Artaphernes, two very good generals, lost to these Greeks, and they lost with vastly superior numbers. This might not be the best idea. Well, Xerxes is not entertained. And Herodotus tells us, Xerxes, enraged by it, made answer as follows, Artabanos, you are my father's brother, and this shall save you from receiving any recompense such as your foolish words deserve. Yet I attach to you this dishonor. He tells him he's going to have to stay home with the women and not get to go on the fight. Well, then that night, Xerxes is like, come on, Xerxes. What are you doing, man? Is this the right call after all? Artabanos' words stick with him, right? And remember, all of this is happening in the background of a giant party with everybody dressed up fancy. Most people are just drunk and having a great time and hitting on each other. They're not thinking about any of this backroom stuff that is also going on. Well, that night, Xerxes falls asleep and he has a visitor, a vision, a dream, something, and he understands it to be an angel or God. And that being seems to indicate to Xerxes that he was flippant and made a fool of himself in the way he responded to Artabanos. And he's warned that he should probably take counsel, that he should at least listen to those things. So then Xerxes wakes up and he's like, hey, everybody back together. Come in here, the meeting room from the party. Hey, my bad. The whole thing's off. I spoke rashly. We're not going to invade Greece. Sorry to Artabanos. Shouldn't have been like that. My bad. Everybody's real happy about it. They go back to the big fancy party with the fancy outfits and all the drinking and hitting on people. But then that night, Xerxes goes back to bed, according to Herodotus, and the visitor returns. And the visitor says, you're just supposed to take counsel, not resign from this great expedition to avenge your father. No, you should definitely still go and do that. And Xerxes is like, what? But I already told everybody, dang it. Okay. So then he decides, all right, I got to bring Artabanos in on this thing. He's like, dude, this is really confusing. I think we're supposed to still do the thing, but I was just supposed to be nice to you. But I need you to verify this. So in a moment that echoes long after the biblical account, but that echoes almost the story of Gideon laying out the fleece to try to understand what God wanted him to do or to confirm it. In a move that echoes that, Xerxes has Artabanos dress up like him in his kingly attire, sit on his throne, and then make his way into Xerxes' bed, all pretending to be the king to, I guess, trick God or an angel. I don't know what the plan is. And the hope that there'll be a vision and that then Xerxes will have external corroboration of this thing. And sure enough, that's how it works. Artabanos gets the visitor, and the visitor says the same thing, and Artabanos and Xerxes get together, compare notes, and they're like, did that just happen? Are we going to invade Greece together? Did we just become best friends? And then they high five, and it freeze frames right as they high five, and the credits roll, and there's a bunch of music. Probably. In my heart, that's how it happened. But at this point, everybody at the party, all the decision makers were like, cool, we don't have to go and do that. Well, then now Xerxes and Artabanos, the only guy who opposed the plan, come back, unified front. They're like, no, it's time to go invade another civilization. We're absolutely doing this. I think these details matter for a couple of reasons. One, it gives you a sense of the stress and strain going on in the background here. These are huge negotiations, and according to the extra biblical story, at least, there's maybe even an element here of Xerxes imagining that somehow there's divine intervention affecting his plans. But it also, second big reason it's worth bringing up, it also makes him look really indecisive. I mean, he declared how everything was going to be, and then he took it back, and then he redeclared it, and then he took it back again. That probably doesn't inspire a ton of confidence in a young leader in his early 30s who's replacing a rock star leader like Darius I. And I think if we know that this is likely what was going on in the background, in the seedy underbelly of this party, we can better appreciate tension so great that it would result in the social calamity, the embarrassment that is going to happen in the passage we're going to look at next between Xerxes and his wife. That was fun. Thanks for doing it with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.